The loudest sound in our the loudest sound in our house wasn't a slammed door or a shouted argument. It was my phone vibrating on the wooden nightstand while I pretended to be asleep. It was 2:47 a.m. The blue glow from the screen leaked through my closed eyelids, pulsing softly, like a heartbeat I was choosing not to hear. I didn't need to look. I knew it was Elena. She was in the living room. She'd been there for 3 hours. And I knew exactly what the message said. She was asking me to come out. She was asking me to talk. She was asking me to look at her and prove that I still saw her. I didn't move. I slowed my breathing, made it deep and steady, the practiced rhythm of a man who had learned how to disappear while still lying in the same bed. I told myself I was exhausted. I told myself her emotions were endless, something I could never satisfy no matter how hard I tried. What I didn't realize was that every time I chose silence, I wasn't just turning away from my wife. I was building a wall, and that wall would eventually bury the person I loved most in this world. Our marriage didn't collapse in one dramatic night. It eroded, slowly, painfully, grain by grain. In the beginning, we were the couple everyone envied. We finished each other's sentences. We shared looks that said more than words ever could. We had a language of our own, built on laughter, inside jokes, and quiet understanding. But somewhere between my promotion at the firm and the birth of our son, Leo, I started pulling inward. I stopped noticing the expressions on Elena's face. I stopped hearing the tremble in her voice when she asked, "How was your day?" Instead, I gave her the version of myself I used at work. Polite, efficient, empty. "David, please," she said earlier that night. We were standing in the kitchen. Steam from the pasta rose between us, thick and white, like a wall we couldn't cross. "I feel like I'm screaming underwater," she said. "I'm right here. Why won't you just look at me?" I checked my watch. I told her I had a conference call in the morning. I told her she was being dramatic. I watched her shoulders sink, slowly, visibly, as if something inside her had finally given up. I felt guilt flicker in my chest, but I pushed it down. I worked 12-hour days. I paid the bills. I was the provider. Wasn't that enough? I didn't understand then that a house provided by a ghost is still an empty home. I told myself my silence made me the stable one, that refusing to engage made me strong. I couldn't see that silence wasn't strength at all. It was a weapon, a cold, precise blade, cutting the life out of our hallway, one quiet night at a time. And it wasn't just Elena. Leo was 6 years old then. He was a gentle child, soft-spoken, big-eyed, the kind of boy who could feel the mood of a room the moment he stepped into it. That night, while I lay there ignoring Elena's message, I heard a faint creak in the floorboards outside our bedroom. A tiny sound. The weight of a child who shouldn't have been awake. I waited for a knock. I waited to hear him call for his mother. Or for me. But the knock never came. There was only a long pause on the other side of the door. A silence that felt too aware. Then, soft, barefoot footsteps, retreating down the carpeted hallway, back into the dark. My heart finally began to pound against my ribs. The phone vibrated one last time, then went still. The silence that followed wasn't calm. It was heavy. It was the kind of silence that holds its breath, waiting for something to break. I closed my eyes and forced myself toward sleep, ignoring the cold weight settling in my chest. I didn't know it then, but in that hallway, in that quiet moment, something inside my son went silent forever. The morning after that 2:47 a.m. message felt like every other morning, and nothing like them at all. I walked into the kitchen to the smell of burnt coffee hanging in the air. Elena stood at the counter, packing Leo's lunchbox. Her movements were mechanical. Snap, click, slide. She didn't look up when I entered. She didn't ask if I wanted breakfast. The silence wasn't angry anymore. It wasn't sharp or explosive. It had turned into something far more dangerous. Indifference. The kind of silence that comes when someone finally stops trying, because they have realized the distance is too far to cross. "I have a late meeting tonight," I said, reaching for a mug. My own voice sounded rough, out of place. Elena nodded. That was it. No argument, no sigh, no reminder that this was the third late meeting this week. She closed the lunchbox and turned toward Leo, who was sitting at the small wooden table in the corner. I looked at my son, expecting him to be playing with his cereal or humming like he usually did. But Leo wasn't playing. He was just sitting. His hands were folded neatly in his lap. His bowl of Cheerios sat untouched, the milk turning gray as the cereal softened. His eyes were fixed on a spot on the wall, just above the baseboard. "Hey, buddy," I said, forcing cheer into my voice. "Excited for school? I heard you're starting that planet's project today." Leo didn't look at me. He didn't even blink. He slowly turned his head, and when he spoke, his voice was flat, empty. "The planets are far away," he said. "They're cold. There's no air there." I let out an awkward chuckle and glanced at Elena, hoping she'd jump in, say something, fix the moment. She finally looked at me. There was no warmth in her eyes, only a hollow reflection of my own distance. "He didn't sleep well," she said, quietly. "He was up late, listening." The word hit me like a blow to the chest. Listening. I thought of those small, barefoot steps outside our bedroom door at 3 a.m, the way I'd held my breath, the way I'd pretended to be asleep. And suddenly I understood something I had been refusing to see. While I was ignoring my wife, my son was absorbing everything. Children don't just hear words. They hear the space between them. They hear silence. They hear absence. As the weeks passed, my strategy of avoidance became my prison. I stayed later at the office. I took the long way home. I told myself I was giving them space. In truth, I was abandoning them in a vacuum. Then I started noticing things. Leo stopped asking me to read to him. He stopped bringing me his drawings. One afternoon, I found a stack of his sketches in the recycling bin. Every drawing was the same: a house, 3 people inside, no doors, no windows, no way in, no way out. "Is he okay at school?" I asked Elena one evening, trying to sound concerned, trying to play the role of a present father. "The teacher called," she said, folding laundry with slow, precise movements. "She says he doesn't play with the other kids anymore. He just stands by the fence and watches." "Watches what?" I asked. Elena stopped folding. She looked at me, her eyes suddenly sharp, painfully clear. She says when they ask him what he's doing, he tells them he's practicing. "Practicing what?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He says he's practicing being quiet, so he won't disappear." My lungs emptied all at once. "He thinks," Elena continued, "that the reason you don't talk to us is because we're too loud. He thinks his voice is what's driving you away." I turned toward the hallway. Leo's door was open, just a crack. Darkness inside. No light. No sound. I walked toward his room, my heart pounding. I told myself I could still fix it, that I could say something, anything, to break whatever spell had settled over him. I pushed the door open gently. Leo was lying on top of his covers, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling. "Leo," I whispered. He didn't move. He didn't look at me. He had learned my greatest skill: silence. And as I stood there, frozen in the doorway, I realized the truth I had been running from. My son wasn't just being quiet. He was fading, right in front of me. The weeks that followed felt like wading through freezing water. I tried to change. I really did. I came home at 6 o'clock sharp. I sat at the dinner table with a smile that felt glued onto my face. I asked Leo about his day, about his friends, about the lunch Elena packed for him. The answers were always the same: a nod, a shrug, or that new terrifying stillness that had settled deep into his bones. Our house became a cathedral of unspoken things. Every clink of a fork against a plate sounded too loud. Every footstep echoed longer than it should have. Elena and I moved around each other like ghosts, careful not to touch, careful not to let our eyes meet for too long. I noticed how she looked at Leo, like a mother guarding the last ember of a fire. And then I noticed how she looked at me. In her eyes, I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was the architect of this cold. The school called again in mid-November. It was Leo's teacher, Mrs. Gable. Her voice was hesitant, careful, the way people sound when they're about to say something that doesn't make sense even to them. "Mr. Sterling," she said, "I'm worried about Leo. It's not that he's disruptive. It's the opposite. It's like he's trying to become invisible." She told me about art class. The children were asked to paint their favorite memory. Leo sat in front of a blank piece of paper for 40 minutes. When she gently asked why he hadn't started, he told her he didn't want to make a mess because the noise of the paint might bother his dad. He stopped speaking in class entirely, she said quietly. He communicates through notes or pointing. It looks like selective mutism, but it feels more like survival. I hung up and sat in my office for an hour, staring at the mahogany desk I'd worked so hard to afford. I thought I was building comfort. I thought quiet meant peaceful. I didn't realize I was teaching my son that his voice had no value, that to be loved by me, he had to disappear. That evening, I tried to break through. Leo was sitting on the living room floor, lining up his toy cars in a perfectly straight row. No racing sounds, no laughter, just the soft click of plastic against wood. I sat beside him and reached for his shoulder. He flinched. It was small, involuntary, and it hurt more than anything he could have said. "I talked to your teacher today," I said. "She says you've been very quiet. You know you can talk to me, right? You can be loud. It's okay." Leo stopped moving the cars. For a second, I saw the old him, the boy who used to climb on my back and scream with laughter. Then his eyes drifted past me, toward the kitchen. Elena stood there, in the shadows, watching. Leo looked back at me and whispered, "But when I talk, you get that look." "What look?" I asked. "The look like you're waiting for the room to be empty again." The words were quiet, but they hit like a tidal wave. He turned back to his cars, carefully aligning a red sedan with a blue truck. In one sentence, my 6-year-old son had diagnosed me. I looked up at Elena. She wasn't crying. She just looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from holding a fire together with bare hands until there's nothing left to burn. "He's stopped eating his favorite foods," she said. "Chewing is too loud for him. He only wants soft things now. Yogurt, applesauce, things that don't make noise in his head." Something twisted violently in my stomach. I wanted to scream. I wanted to apologize until my voice broke. But the air in the house felt too heavy, too dense with all the silence I had built, brick by brick. Leo stood up. His footsteps were so light they didn't even make the floorboards complain. He walked down the hallway and disappeared into his room without a word. I stayed on the floor, surrounded by a perfect line of toy cars that led nowhere. I finally looked at Elena. Really looked. I saw the gray hairs that hadn't been there 2 years ago. The grief etched quietly around her mouth. "Elena, She shook her head. "Not now." She turned off the kitchen light and walked away, leaving me alone in the dark, finally terrified of the silence I had created. The breaking point didn't come with a scream. It came with a glass of spilled milk. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening, the kind of night that should have vanished into memory without a trace. We were sitting at the dinner table. The air was thick, heavy with everything we refused to say. I stared at my plate, pushing a piece of chicken back and forth. Elena sat across from me, perfectly still. Leo was between us, carefully sipping water, his eyes locked on his plate as if memorizing every detail. I reached for the salt. My sleeve brushed the edge of Leo's plastic cup. Time slowed. The milk tipped, spilled. A thin white river raced across the table and dripped onto the floor. In a normal home, someone would laugh. Someone would grab a napkin. Maybe there'd be a soft scolding. But in our house, the dull thud of that cup hitting the table sounded like an explosion. Leo didn't cry. He froze, his entire body locked in place, his face drained of color, turning pale and translucent. He stared at the milk, then slowly looked up at me. There was no fear of punishment in his eyes. There was terror. Pure, unfiltered terror. His hands began to shake, then his shoulders. His breathing turned sharp and shallow, each breath carefully restrained, as if even inhaling too loudly might be dangerous. Leo, it's okay, I said, my voice cracking. It's just milk. It's fine. I reached for his hand, and that's when everything shattered. Leo scrambled backwards so violently his chair tipped over. The crash of wood against the floor was the final blow. He clamped his hands over his ears, squeezed his eyes shut, and let out a low, broken moan. Not a cry, not a scream. Something worse. The sound of something breaking inside. He backed into the corner of the room, sliding down the wall until he was a small, shaking ball on the floor. I'm sorry, he whispered, over and over. I'm sorry I was loud. I'll be quiet. I'll be so quiet. Please don't go. Please don't leave the room. I'll be invisible, Daddy. I promise. The silence I had built collapsed on top of me. I dropped to my knees. Leo, no, I choked. It's not you. It was never you. But he pressed himself tighter into the corner. His eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal searching for escape. The world had become too heavy for him to breathe in. Then I heard it. Elena. She didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. She stood, walked to the corner, and sat down beside Leo. She didn't look at me. She didn't acknowledge my presence. She wrapped her arms around our son and rocked him gently. It's okay, she whispered into his hair. You can make noise. You can scream. You can cry. You can break everything in this house, and I will still be here. You don't have to be quiet to be loved. Then she looked up at me. There was no anger in her eyes. There was something worse. Clarity. She looked at me the way you look at a stranger who caused an accident and is standing there, stunned, with blood on their hands. Get out, David, she said calmly. Elena, please. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, she snapped. You spent years becoming a ghost. And you didn't care that your son was dying trying to find you. You wanted silence? Look at him. Look at what your silence did. I looked at Leo. He stared at me through his fingers, wide-eyed, empty, like I was a monster from a storybook, a creature that devoured voices and left nothing behind. I understood then. I couldn't fix this with words. I couldn't fix this with apologies. I had taught them I wasn't there. And now, they believed me. Go, Elena said again, before he forgets how to breathe. My legs felt heavy as I stood. Every step toward the door echoed. I opened it and stepped into the night, the latch clicking behind me like the final period at the end of a long sentence. I stood on the porch, waiting for relief. It never came. only a hollow ache where my family used to be. From inside the house, I heard it, a sound I had nearly erased. Leo sobbing, loud, broken, real. It was the most beautiful and devastating sound I had ever heard. And I was standing on the wrong side of the door. I live in a small apartment now, 3 miles away from the house with the wooden nightstand and the red toy cars. It's quiet here too, but this isn't the quiet of rest. It's the quiet of aftermath. I spend most evenings sitting by the window, watching the sunset reflect off buildings I helped design, slowly realizing something I never understood before. You can build strong structures your entire life and still end up living in ruins. Elena and I didn't have a dramatic divorce. No shouting in courtrooms, no battles over furniture. When we signed the papers, she looked at me with something far worse than anger, pity. She had already moved on to the stage of grief where I wasn't a wound anymore. I was just a shadow that had finally stopped haunting her hallway. She had found her voice again. She just didn't want to use it on me. I see Leo every other weekend. At first, those visits felt unbearable. We'd sit in a park or at a diner, and the silence between us felt solid, like a wall I couldn't climb. I tried to talk too much. I filled the air with useless words about work, weather, movies, trying to make up for years of absence in a single afternoon. Leo would just watch me, not bored, not annoyed, studying me, like he was listening to a language he once knew but no longer trusted. He's 10 now. He talks again, but his voice is careful, measured. Every word sounds like it's been weighed before being released. He doesn't laugh out loud. When something is funny, he smiles just enough to acknowledge it, never enough to give himself away. A few weeks ago, I took him to the zoo. We stood in front of the lion enclosure. The animal paced back and forth behind thick glass, silent, heavy, powerful, but contained. Leo pressed his forehead against the glass. "Dad?" he whispered. "Yeah, buddy." "Do you think the lion is lonely?" he asked. "Or do you think he likes it? Because no one can get in to bother him." I didn't answer right away. I looked at the lion. Then I looked at my son, and I saw it. A child who learned, far too early, that the safest way to survive was to become unreachable. "I think he's lonely," I said quietly. "I think he'd give anything for someone to hear him, even if he didn't know how to ask." Leo nodded. Then he walked away to the next exhibit, his footsteps so light they barely disturbed the gravel. That's when I understood something I wish I had learned sooner. Silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's a presence. It grows in the spaces where love used to live. I thought I was protecting myself from arguments, from emotional mess, from noise. But all I really did was evacuate the heart of my home. I saved myself discomfort. And in exchange, I lost the right to hear my son's laughter. Now I come home to my apartment. My phone sits on the counter. No missed calls. No late night texts. No one asking me to come out and talk. I got exactly what I wanted. Peace. Stillness. A world where no one needs anything from me emotionally. And yet, some nights, when the clock creeps toward 3 a.m., I stand in the middle of my living room staring at the door, wishing for a floorboard to creak, wishing for a voice to break the silence, wishing for a child to cry out, wishing for a wife to say she's tired of waiting. I scroll through old photos on my phone. Leo at 4, his mouth wide open in a joyful scream as I spun him around the backyard. I touch the screen, trying to remember what that sound felt like against my chest. I used to believe the most important things in life were the things we say. I know better now. The most important things are the things we listen to, the moments we catch before they fall into silence forever. I ignored my wife because I thought I had time. I ignored my son because I thought he was just being good. Now I live inside the masterpiece of quiet I created, a man surrounded by everything he ever asked for, realizing too late that the silence didn't protect me. It was the sound of my family leaving, one heartbeat at a time. And I sit in the dark, waiting for a sound I know is never coming back.